What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here. Wanted to let you know that I recorded this episode around 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 25th, right before the Panthers had officially announced Canales. They did announce him, so it is the real deal. He is your new coach. Anyways, enjoy. Well, folks, it has finally happened. The Carolina Panthers announce that they are getting their guy, and their guy is Dave Canales, offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That may be the most optimistic tone you will hear from me during this show. No, I'm not disappointed. Just very much disappointed. Well, I'm going to give Dave the benefit of the doubt. Dave Canales, that is. And I did a very small blurb today in the soaking rain, as you guys could see if you went back and watched the video. But the news came out. I got home. I said I was going to do it this weekend, and I decided, you know what, let's go ahead. Let's knock it out. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to Nolan about the Ravens, about the AFC, NFC Championship, and it felt like a good opportunity tonight to just do this. It's hot off the press. What's weird about this thing is every outlet out there is reporting this as a thing. I have yet to see the Panthers officially acknowledge this. So is this like some big joke that we're just waiting for someone to, come out and impractical joker us or say, joke's on you, just kidding, it's not going to be him? Is that what's going to happen? I don't think so. But Dave's the guy. And I sat here just thinking through this whole thing, and I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have a single Panthers fan telling you they knew he was going to be the guy from day one, they're a liar. Do not talk to them ever. Just cut them out of your life, because nobody in their right mind from day one had Dave pegged. Now, over the last week, sure. I went on ESPN Wilmington this week talking to Randy Slack, and I said, sounds like Dave Canales. You look at the ties with Dave Canales and Dan Morgan. I said, it all makes sense. He's not the big home run or the flashy name, but he's the guy that we're likely going to land. And sure enough, that's what happens. But for someone to sit here and tell you that they had Dave as the guy from day one, nope, I'm not buying it. I looked back at my tweets, and I had Dave pegged as a potential offensive coordinator. Now, I know he wasn't interviewing for the coordinator position, but I thought on the off chance we have this Ejiro Evero model and maybe he does leave Tampa, or not that they would want to let him go. But I ranked my coaches, and I had, I think, contenders, sleepers, guys that are kind of a long shot, and then I had him in his own category. He was in his own category by himself as a coordinator. And he's the guy that ends up landing the job for the Carolina Panthers. A lot to digest right now for the fan base. I will say, what this move does is it sets the tone for the next 2 or 3 years. And what I mean by that is, if we had gone with Vrabel, Bill Belichick, Harbaugh, Ben Johnson, maybe even Slowick, but I don't think Slowick is much. But if you go with one of those bigger names, there's going to be a pressure, just like it was with Frank, to win now. And again, I'm not saying that I don't want the Panthers to win today, and I don't want them to win now. I want the Panthers to win. I talked about that, until I'm blue in the face. But we are going to have kind of this buffer now. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but you've got a buffer with a brand new coach, young coach, first-time head coach, paired with a first-time GM. And the model, is it going to look like what Seattle was built on? Because Seattle's had some really good teams over the years, and the Panthers should know, as they were one of our biggest rivals, in the 2010s to early 20s. Every year it felt like, whether it was playoffs or in season, battling back and forth with the Seattle Seahawks, they built a really good brand of football, and that is exactly where Dave Canales comes from. I looked at the preview that I put together, he was on probably one of the shortest previews. I remember his name popping and doing his segment. I was like, oh, this is going to be kind of me just checking off a box saying that I did the Dave Canales preview. And here we are, new coach. For those who did not watch that, because guess what? Another reason I'm going to tell you Panthers fans were not high on him is he was like the least watched video out of all my coaching profiles. And we had some with like Ben Johnson, Slowick, Raheem Morris. I don't think he was up there, but there were some with 500, 600 views. And your boy Dave was at the bottom with like 30. But my man, Dave Canales, got his start at Carson High School as an offensive coordinator from 04 to 06. Then went on to El Camino College from 06 to 08 as a special teams and tight ends coach. University of Southern California in 09 as an assistant strength coach. And then joined Seattle from 2010 to 2017. He was the wide receivers coach. 7 years. That's a long run to sit as one position coach and not make a jump. It makes you a little hesitant. I was listening to WFNZ on the way home, for those who don't know, sports radio out of Charlotte, and they were talking about, or they brought on someone that writes for Tampa Bay, and I think it might have just been the local paper in Tampa Bay. So sorry, I don't remember because I was in the car. I don't know who the guy was, but he kind of had a mixed feeling about this as well, like kind of feeling okay, but at the same time, not very hype. And that kind of says something when you've been a position coach, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but a position coach for 7 years without incremental improvements. He did make the jump to quarterbacks coach in 18 and 19 for Seattle, and then was the passing game coordinator from 20 to 21, back to quarterbacks coach in 22, and then the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past year, 2023. Now, here's the thing. If you want to talk about positivity and trying to find something positive out of this situation, I looked at Baker Mayfield's stats. I looked at Geno Smith's stats. Baker Mayfield had his best year as a quarterback under the helm of Dave Canales. And I had his stats pulled up, and of course I just took them down, so I apologize for that. I'll get it pulled up in a second. But Geno Smith, same thing. Both quarterbacks were top 10 in passing yards. Really, their most efficient years. And, I mean, this was quite a leap for Geno Smith in 2022. Had 4,200 passing yards. Before that, his previous high was 3,000, and that was his first year in the league. Touchdowns, most touchdown passes in a season, 30 to 11. And then you look at the drop-off, and I know he missed 2 games, but the drop-off from last year to this year, almost 800 less passing yards, 20 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So quite a difference. One thing that scares me, and I guess it doesn't really scare me with Geno because Canales wasn't the offensive coordinator, but sacks. Geno Smith, year that Canales was his quarterback coach, sacked 46 times. Baker Mayfield was sacked, I think, over 40 times this year. Not great. Let me get up Baker's stats real fast for you. I had them pulled up before because I was going through comparing it. 4,044 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. It was his best year as a passer. We know what he did here in Carolina, which was nothing. That says a lot, though. In 28 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, like I said, sacked 40 times exactly. Best passer rating, right under his best passer rating of his career, but 94.6 passer rating. So he can get really good play out of the quarterbacks, but you've got to have way more than just good quarterback play. And when we talk about the offensive line wasn't great. We don't need Bryce getting banged around in the pocket year after year after year, game after game, snap after snap. You cannot survive. I mean, you look at Carr, drafted by the Texans, most time sacked in a season, and You don't want to see someone continue to get hit and hit and hit because it will shorten their time in this league. But as we look at Tampa Bay's offense as a whole, the reason I was not high and the reason that nobody else was high on this is they put up about 20.5 points per game, which is 20th in the league. Rushing attack was terrible. Worst rushing attack in the league, 88.8 yards per game. You can't have that. Like, we've seen the struggles of Bryce and what that's looked like without Miles Sanders, with trying to figure out who Chuba Hubbard is and what he's going to be. We've seen that. And you can't do that with this rushing attack around Bryce. Passing yards, 237 passing yards per game. Shaked out to about 18th. But, I mean, Baker ended up finishing in the top 10 as far as passing yards this season. So, I'm not worried about the passing game. I'm worried about the rushing game, and I'm worried about the structure of the offense. So now, Thomas Brown likely gone. I don't see him being retained. The question that comes up is Evero going to be retained? It looks like with, oh my gosh, Atlanta Falcons getting Raheem Morris, that there's a very good possibility that we get to keep Evero, possibly even Chris Tabor. But now we got to find an offensive coordinator, and it may be someone that he worked with previously in Tampa Bay. It could be someone that he worked with in Seattle. But you got to build out an offensive staff, and it could be a reset on the entire offensive side of the ball, especially if you want to implement whatever scheme and plan. I think he's more of a West Coast offensive kind of guy. He's going to make sure that he gets those players in there. But now we got to think about personnel, and this is the importance out of this situation. You know, like I said, I don't know if there's a lot of positivity, but if I'm looking at this thing, if Dan Morgan was Tepper's guy, okay, I think this feels like Dan Morgan's hire more so than Tepper's, which gives me a little bit of confidence. Just a little smidge. I'm not saying that Tepper's, completely stepping away and he's not going to be involved in the meddling and all that we talk about there, but it does give me a little bit of hope because of their connection. And I do think what's really weird is, like, today they're bringing in Vrabel, and you had the list, like I've talked about, of like 3 coaches plus Vrabel: Raheem, Canales, Ejiro, and then Vrabel. I joked that Vrabel must have just been leaving Tepper's house when this news broke, and how frustrating would that have been for you to spend all day coming down, flying, interviewing, and for this really to be a pawn for him and Atlanta and showing his, I don't know. Side tangent, sounds like Bill Belichick's going to be out of the league, man. Bill Belichick out of the league, at least for this year, because no other team, all the places he was interviewing are full. Yeah, things are moving fast and a lot faster than people thought, and it does make sense that Ben Johnson is the guy now for the Washington Commanders. But this dynamic and team, I was never impressed with Tampa Bay's offense this year, and I know Baker was banged up a little bit. But you look at when the Panthers played them both games, close game, the first game 21-18-ish. You look at the second game, a playoff game essentially, and they scored 9 points against our defense. So it doesn't give me tons to write home about and say, oh, we found our savior. And I think it was Pro Football Focus tweeted out, how would you grade this? They're doing that with every hire. I really like this guy, and I wish I had pulled up. So credit to whoever said this if you're watching. I'll give it a C, as in we will see how this is going to go. And I like what he said there. I was a little bit higher at first, but now I am going to sit right in the middle because it's not fantastic. It's not the worst thing, but it's definitely not the home run hire. It's not what we wanted. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe not getting in this brand name, or maybe we're ahead of the curve when it comes to figuring these things out. And next year, he could have been the hottest name on the market. Who knows? But we've got our guy. Now it's time to settle in, y'all, because whatever this is, it's it. This is it. Next 2 or 3 years, buckle up, Panthers Nation, because this is the football that you're going to get. This is the front office. It's not going anywhere. There's no way you can pull the trigger on either of these guys, at least until they're in here for 2+ years. So if they just miserably fail for 2 years in a row, then yeah, I think you do get another reset. For my sake and just everybody, I hope we don't. I think this thing's going to take a little bit more time. And this is where, Bryce Young, talk about being on the clock. His clock is activated. He's got 2 years to prove it. 2 years to prove that he can be a franchise quarterback, a starting quarterback, and that Canales can get the most out of this guy. Because if it doesn't work, he's gone. And maybe if there was a little bit of success along the way, Canales and Morgan are retained. But it's all going to start with how this team is built. And I saw Adam Schefter tweeting in a video that the most important relationship is Dave Canales and Bryce Young. Wrong. The most important relationship that is involved with this team is Dave Canales and Dan Morgan. Because if they cannot get on the same page to building a roster that can protect Bryce, that can give him time to throw, and a really solid defense around him, it's going nowhere. And I don't care how much of a connection that these two have together. Because the Buccaneers were 9-8, and they won our division. I will give kudos to them. But when I was listening to the guy from Tampa Bay talk, one of the things he said is he also credits Todd Bowles. Because Todd Bowles is the one that made the decision to go after Baker and, see something in him and pull him in. And the Buccaneers, as an organization, are way more competent than anything we have seen here in Carolina in quite a while. And it's across the board. That's one of the reasons Baker even said he wanted to go there. Thing that gives me a slim bit of hope, and I'm hoping that, odds are Dave Canales probably hasn't watched a lot of Bryce film, only because he's coaching and watching the defensive film that you're going against them. I know Todd Bowles has, and Todd Bowles was very high on Bryce Young. So I hope that sentiment holds true and through with what Dave Canales says and what he thinks. But to me, and the rumors kind of fluttered around too, looking at Joe Person's article talking about this, that Bryce Young's agent was kept in the loop with this thing to understand it, to know, not necessarily who's going to be picked, but they were in the loop. Bryce Young was the focal point of this, and that to me is not the way you go through this entire thing. Your quarterback should not be at the center of any decisions that you're making for the future of an organization and a football team. It should be about the team and how are you going to improve this entire team. And it's all about ego. And because David Tepper really wanted this guy, he's going to make sure he's got the people in here that fully support his dream, because he wants to look amazing in 3 or 4 years and winning football games, which I want to, you know what, if he does, he does. But he doesn't want to look, doing it someone else's way. It's got to be his way. Yeah. So anyways, that's all I got, folks. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.